the left is afraid that a 5-minute video of conservative thought will undo 4 years of what we call high school left-wing progressive indoctrination. And here's the key. They're right. It takes 5 minutes to burst the irrational, superficial bubble of the left. It doesn't take longer. It's fascinating. They write, PragerU brainwashes. How can you brainwash in 5 minutes? They have kids for 15, 16, 17, 18 years, and then university. And we're brainwashing in 5 minutes. It's Orwellian.
Welcome to Reasoned UK with me, Darren Grimes. Please do consider hitting that little subscribe button and the notification bell. On today's show, I'm so excited about this one, and I know I say that every single week. Dennis Prager is a radio show host, a New York Times best-selling author, and author of The Rational Bible, a columnist, an orchestra conductor, and crucially, for my introduction to the man, the myth and the legend, the founder of PragerU, the fantastically successful YouTube channel that's amassed billions of views and has had such an impact that not only did I launch this channel inspired by PragerU, but big tech seem absolutely desperate to shadow ban, to restrict, and to outright censor its content. So I'll stop my whittling now and we'll get him on. Hi, Dennis.
Wow, that was beautiful. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
No, thank you it really is an honor for us, so thank you. Now, Dennis, can I start by asking you, what do you think of the differences between British and American conservatism? Are there core values that bind conservatism everywhere, universally? For example, we don't have a Second Amendment in our country, and as Americans often highlight, a socialist healthcare system that has terrible outcomes when compared with similar countries.
That's an excellent question. And I would say the biggest difference, interestingly enough, I think the biggest difference is there are many more of us. We are a much more powerful movement in America than anywhere else. Sadly, when I have guests from the UK or elsewhere in Europe who share my values on my radio show, I will say to them, one of the biggest differences between conservatism in America and conservatism in your country is we have talk radio. And there's no question about that. Talk radio is the unspoken giant in the United States. And I'm not saying it because I'm a talk radio host. I'm saying it because it's true. The New York Times just had an article saying that because they hate talk radio. And needless to say, and on their opinion page, they had an article that talk radio dwarfs Fox News in numbers, dwarfs the Wall Street Journal, dwarfs everything. And that's true. I wish you had it. But in America, it's so easy to buy a radio station. It's like buying candy. You just go in, you pay the money, and you own a radio station. It's because it's all privately owned. You don't have to be certified. I mean, you can't violate Federal Communications Commission's laws. I cannot curse on the radio, which I'm totally in favor of not cursing. But that's one huge difference. Another is, my sense is that, and I'm not sure I'm right, but my sense is that American conservatives place more emphasis on the importance of God and religion than European conservatives would. There are many secular conservatives in the United States, and as ironic as this sounds, I would say God bless them. But there's been such a successful secularization of the mind in Europe that it does not dawn upon secular conservatives in Europe that forget whether God exists or not. I almost never talk about that. I talk about the importance of God rather than the existence of God. And that is something I don't think European conservatives share with us.
Well, we might be able to get on to the sort of God-shaped hole, which I think is a real problem for the West in due course. But first of all, I want to touch on conservatism, and in particular on fearful conservatism. And you speak eloquently about this, and you argue actually it's more dangerous than radical leftism. Could you just explain for us why this is the case?
When you're referring to fearful conservatism, you're referring to what exactly?
I mean, fearful conservatism as far as in the United Kingdom, for example, we had a fantastically successful politician called Margaret Thatcher, who was renowned, obviously you know Margaret Thatcher, but she was renowned for her conviction. She was a conviction politician, whereas we believe our current crop of conservative politicians
That's correct. Well,
are quite fearful.
So I wasn't even thinking of them when you asked me the other question. I don't consider them conservatives. They're simply not leftists. But not leftist and conservative with conviction is not the same thing. I was thinking of conservatives with conviction. I was thinking of the great Paul Johnson. I was thinking of Douglas Murray, another a fellow Brit. I mean, these people have convictions. I'll tell you the dividing line, not between American conservatives and European conservatives, but between conviction conservatives and people who are conservative more in name. And I'm not condemning them, just describing them. To me, the operative question is, do you understand the mortal threat that the left poses to Western civilization? If you do not think it's a mortal threat, then you and I have something in common, but very little.
If we think about that theme of being fearful and the courage to speak about one's convictions and the steep prices, Dennis, that can attach to it. And there's one example I always think of, and it's an American example. And during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests in DC, I believe, and the mob are requesting that this lady do the sort of power salute or whatever these radical Marxists call it. And this woman, sitting enjoying a meal with a friend, refuses to raise her fist at the mob's request. And Dennis, I don't know about you, but I don't know this woman. I don't know her from Adam. But I felt an immense sense of pride watching that video. And how do we get people to be as brave as that lady?
You can say no to this, but are you familiar with my fireside chats each week for PragerU?
I watch them, yes.
The most recent one is exactly about that, courage. And for your viewers, let me just say, all the good traits in the world amount to little if they are not accompanied by courage. There are many good and kind and loyal and honest people, but without courage, it all amounts to almost nothing. So you hit the key subject, courage. I will tell you something I have not said on my radio show, not because I wouldn't, but because I just happen not to. But when you raised this issue and your reaction to the woman who would not raise her hand in a BLM, Black Lives Matter, a salute fist, I'll tell you what I thought. I have something you don't have, and it's built into me because I'm a Jew. And because I'm old enough, I was not born at the time of World War II. I was born after, but I was my parents' generation lived through the Holocaust. So it permeated many Jews' lives. And I have always wondered, in seeing a group of people, if there were a Nazi regime, who would rescue, who would hide a Jew? That woman would hide a Jew. That's one of the first things I thought.
What do you think, though, Dennis, that, I mean, if we consider Europe's lockdown strategy, and there seems to be a sort of acceptance, widespread acceptance, that we can achieve something as out there and nonsensical as total safety. Now, Dennis, as you know, total safety is completely unachievable, and actually, I would argue, not even desirable. So are we, in the West, as a society here in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, are we actually losing that courage of our convictions and just courage in general?
The American national anthem ends with the words, "Land of the free and home of the brave." This is how Americans have seen themselves. It is worthy of crying that when I tell you I no longer look at America as the land of the free and the home of the brave. The writers of the national anthem understood they go together. It takes bravery to have freedom, and you have to be free as well as brave. I mean, they are the twin pillars of a good civilization. I have announced on my radio show for decades, this is utterly predates COVID-19. I have said health über alles has become the motto of modern civilization. It's taken from the German, Deutschland über alles, Germany above everything. And I have substituted health über alles. And that's all you hear. That's why they have safe spaces on campuses in America. If a conservative comes to your campus and you feel bad, you can retreat, and then we'll give you candy and Play-Doh and hot chocolate, and you can watch videos of frolicking puppies. That's what they have, actually. But anyway, this is the notion: safety above all, health above all. And it's interesting. I connect it to the secularization of society, and my proof is that religious Jews and Christians in America are the only organized opposition to the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Secularization. I have often said, I've been broadcasting 35 years in the United States, and I've often said, there has been one overarching theme to 35 years of broadcasting: the consequences of secularism. Everybody knows the consequences of too much religion, but nobody talks about the consequences of too much secularism. We are living through one of them now: cowardice.
I mean, I am a Christian of relatively recent faith, actually. I was baptized and confirmed in 2018. But Dennis, I think the sort of luxury I have of being in that, of coming to faith, is that I now recognize what a massive God-shaped hole we have, not just in the United Kingdom, but across the West. Not so much, it's not as pronounced as you put it in America, especially in conservatism. But I wonder if you think that that's why people across the West are looking for movements to belong to. They're looking for something bigger than themselves to belong to, because we do have that God-shaped hole in our lives. Do you think that explains why people want to belong to Extinction Rebellion or Black Lives Matter, or in our own country, worship the National Health Service? You know, is that what explains these movements?
Oh, entirely. This is why I say this is the theme of my life. Now, there is a quote. It's attributed to one of your folks, G.K. Chesterton. But I can't, nobody could prove that he actually said it. But I only say this because I didn't say it. When people stop believing in God, They don't believe in no God. They believe, what is it? They believe in any God or something to that effect. Did I get that right?
About that,
Are
I
you
think so,
familiar with
yeah.
it?
I am
Yeah.
familiar with it, but it is
So
disputed.
I'm sorry?
It is disputed that he actually said it, but
Yes,
it is a
whether
fantastic
he's
quote.
the man.
Yeah,
But I'm only saying it because I never like to
yeah,
take credit for a great quote that I didn't come up with.
yeah.
That's what happens. People don't the 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 death of the Judeo-Christian value system in the West has led to catastrophe, utter catastrophe. Nazism, fascism, communism were the isms that replaced Christianity. Christianity dies, you don't get kindness, you get sickness. And I'm saying this as a Jew. I mean, Heine, the greatest German poet, Heinrich Heine, said 100 years before Hitler's election in Germany that the only thing, and he was a secularized, he was a completely non-religious Jew. And he's not even known as a Jew. I'm just mentioning this because it gives added credibility to what he said. The only thing, I'm paraphrasing, the only thing stopping Germans from becoming barbarians is the cross. And if that cross is destroyed, there's hell to pay. And that is exactly what has happened. And this is happening now in America. The most secularized generation in American history is lost, confused, buys lies, and doesn't even value freedom. America was founded by people who actually believe that God wants us to be free. You're not going to have freedom when you drop God, and that is just the way it works. I just had Douglas Murray on my fireside chat when he was in America just a couple of weeks ago, making a video for PragerU, and he uses the term. I think he says donut shaped hold, or the hole in society, in the donut of society. You have to fool yourself to think you can get rid of God and the Bible and still have wonderful values. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And if we consider, Dennis, that good ideas have to be repeated, does this explain why the West is losing its moral compass and its anchor? Because good ideas simply aren't being repeated. In fact, they've been forgotten.
They don't even believe in good ideas. There's nothing better than anything else. The West is not better. Beethoven is no better than Indonesian gamelan music. This is what the chief music critic of the New York Times wrote. It's racist to even imply that Western music is better, even though you ask Japanese, what is the greatest music? They'll tell you Bach and Beethoven. Japanese will. I don't love Beethoven because I'm white or because I'm Western. I love him because he's great. I don't love Shakespeare because I can read English. I love Shakespeare because he's great. I love Dostoevsky because he's great. Well, I don't have much in common with Dostoevsky. I don't have anything in common with Dostoevsky. He was Russian. He was Russian Orthodox. I'm a Jew. I'm an American. He was a Russian. But he's great. I learned an immense amount from him. I feel bad for your generation. Your generation is the first generation in Western history not to be given what is considered the greatest music, the greatest art, the greatest literature. In America, you are now taught based on race, gender, and class, not based on excellence.
We'll get on. That is one question I want to ask you after this question, actually, about critical race theory and unconscious bias training, and having the bravery to reject both of them. But the first question, which does feed into that, the courage to speak about one's convictions coming at a steep price, and you arguing that actually the bravery deficit and keeping silent about your values, and actually the fear of speaking up being greater than the reality of doing so, it does still require a lot of courage, right? And if I consider Britain withdrawal from the European Union. I campaigned for that in 2016, Brexit as it's known. I campaigned for it, and Dennis, you won't be too shocked. I don't think this will be the most shocking thing that you'll have heard. And actually, I read your anecdote about the orchestra that tried to have you cancelled as the conductor of the orchestra. And my friend turned around to me and she said, I can't speak to you anymore now that Britain's voted for Brexit. You campaigned for it. I can't speak to you. And that was over a decade, that friendship. And just like that, it ended because she found my values so objectionable. So it does come with a steep price. What would your message be to those concerned about anecdotes like that one? And your orchestra.
I have a number of responses. One is I want people to understand that the battle for freedom you pay a price. You pay a price to fight for good values. And I always think of the following. When I think of the soldiers who invaded Normandy Beach to face the German machine guns, and if not inevitable, likely death or being paralyzed or whatever, I think, hey, compared to what others, the price others have paid for freedom, to preserve freedom, I think I can handle losing a friend. I really do believe people need perspective in life, and so they need to know the battle for freedom is a steep one. The human being does not yearn to be free. Mm-hmm. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. People yearn to be taken care of. That's why the left is so popular. The left appeals to human nature much more than conservatism does. Conservatism wants us to be free, but human nature doesn't want us to be free. Human nature wants us to be taken care of. That's why in Latin America, they keep voting in socialist governments as they get less and less freedom in their country. They don't care. They want to be taken care of. Americans increasingly want to be taken care of. So when people are said you pay a steep price, then I can only say it's not as steep as a lot of people have paid. Number two, there's a very great consolation. If people drop you because of your values, then you should thank God that you didn't spend more time wasting your time with that person. Mm. It's like, oh, wow, now I know this person is not for me. Number three, it gets worse. The number, in America at least, the number of adult children who will not speak to a parent who voted for Donald Trump is probably in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. I get calls on my radio show from people who are not allowed to see their grandchildren because they voted for Trump.
Terrible. Do you think that sort of forgetting about the value of freedom, the intrinsic value of freedom, explains why, we're seeing millions in our own country, but in the States as well, it certainly has been the case and will be the case if Biden wins the presidency. Millions of people propelled into financial misery and squalor thanks to lockdowns, mental health shot to pieces, and our healthcare system cancelling cancer screenings and treatments, for goodness sake. I want to know, Dennis, what has happened to the West during coronavirus? Can there ever be such a thing as ever being totally safe and people longing for that more than they long for freedom? What has happened to us?
That's right. Well, that's what happened. You expressed it extremely well. In 1968-69, 100,000 Americans died of what was known as the Hong Kong flu. Those were the days when you could actually name viruses after their city or place of origin. And nothing now, 100,000 then is equal to 165,000 in population terms of America today. 165,000 Americans died. They didn't close one candy shop. Nothing was closed. That was when Woodstock took place, with vast numbers of young people hugging, Not only did they not practice social distancing, the whole purpose was not to have any social distancing. And life went on because people understood viruses come, viruses go. Death is a tragedy. Life is tragic. We have lost the understanding, and this is again secularization. We have lost the understanding that life is tragic. There is a utopian expectation that life can be non-tragic, but it cannot be. So we do our best and we move on, like, incredibly, I would never have expected it, Sweden did.
Absolutely. Sweden has been the sort of clarion call. Yeah, totally.
I know.
Absolutely. With its taxes as well.
It's truly fascinating. It shows you how individuals determine societies. Their epidemiologists were actually non-hysterics. When you get a degree in epidemiology, you get a certificate of hysteria that accompanies it. And if you are a non-hysteric, the epidemiology profession gradually removes you. But in Sweden, the head of health was a non-hysteric and understood that you cannot close down a society, period. You just cannot. That should not be an option. Never in the history of the world has this happened. I said this in March. People could see on the internet. I called this the greatest worldwide mistake in history, and I have been vindicated, unfortunately. Sweden has kept its schools open the entire time. Kids under 16 went to school the entire time. Not one child in Sweden has died of the virus or communicated it to a teacher who died.
Yeah. Now, I promised we'd speak about... I've got a few more questions, but I promised we'll rattle through them. But I promised that we'd speak about critical race theory and unconscious bias training. And the reason I want to ask you a question about those two things is because I get so many emails, Dennis, from people saying, Darren, what do I do? I've been asked to take training on unconscious bias, on my unconscious bias, to, basically be sat in a room and told that you're a bigot and you didn't know it. And they say, I don't want to do this, but I fear losing my job. And then in our schools, parents fear writing to their schools of their children for fear of their children being marked down in exams, etc., because they don't want them to learn about critical race theory. But their kids are being taught this stuff. Kids are being told that they have some inherent privilege because of their skin color. Can you imagine a more racist idea than that? I just think it's absurd. But what would your message be to one, these parents, and two, these employees who fear for their livelihoods if they say no?
Because of my involvement in classical music, as you mentioned earlier, I have a lot of friends in different orchestras in America. One of them is in one of considered the 5 major orchestras. I won't go further than that. He's been a conservative and he has never opened up about it to his colleagues because he doesn't want tension or to be ostracized. And interestingly, he has actually become a religious Christian in his case in the course of this lockdown, not because of the lockdown, but because it gave him time to think. And he has decided to come out as conservative on Facebook, and with all the consequences that there might be in his orchestra. He's not preaching Christianity. He's just saying, I'm conservative. And I don't know if he's mentioning who he's voting for, but everybody would infer from that who he's voting for. People snap. At a given point, they say, I cannot live the life of the silent. It's like gays. Gays were very quiet. They were afraid that they would lose their job. And one day, many snapped. And they said, I'm coming out as gay, and let the consequences be what they are. And I remember, this is now 25 years ago, A man called my show when I was only on in LA. I have a national show since 1999, but prior to that, I was on in Los Angeles. And a man called me. He said, "Dennis, I work in Hollywood, and I want you to know I came out as gay and this is 25 years ago." He said, "That was effortless, but I will never come out as a Republican." So people have to make decisions. I will never say to somebody, I think you should lose your job. I have not lost my job, so it's it's a little wrong, I think, of me to tell people, yeah, I think you should lose your job and speak out. But if it's anything less than losing your job, including grades in school, I think you should speak up.
With the grades in school, is that just because you will regret that for the rest of your life? What is a grade worth?
I'll tell you why. Courage, all good values take muscle training. And my comment to parents who ask me this question about their kids at school is this: I'm not going to tell you what to tell your child. That's obviously your decision. But I would tell you what you asked me, so this is my answer. If a human being is going to compromise on their values for a grade in school, when will they stop compromising on their values?
Mm-hmm. Beautifully put. Why do you believe, Dennis, that our schools and universities, and this is a phenomenon here and in the United States, don't teach reason anymore? And what I mean by that, I think you will have seen this, where you've got Tampax arguing that menstruation isn't exclusively the preserve of biological women. And this stuff has been taught in our schools and universities. And this is surely, it defies reason. What's going on?
The left, and I always distinguish between left and liberals, the left is a religion, and it is a religion that is far more contemptuous of reason than either Judaism or Christianity, who both celebrate reason. The left has never celebrated reason. It celebrates passion. How do you feel? Not what is right is the question. What is true is a liberal question. It is a conservative question. It has never been a left-wing question. There are now actually arguments by left-wing academics that say this notion of objectivity must be gotten rid of. So they are already coming out of the closet as anti-rational. That's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Could you just tell us a story, Dennis, about the high school near Toledo in Ohio, which offered students a PragerU video, and actually what it tells us?
So if you folks go to on the internet and just type in Dennis Prager and high school PragerU video, it'll come up, or just go to DennisPrager.com. But it's on so many websites: townhall.com, dailywire.com, americangreatness.com, jewishworldreview.com. But it's my latest column. It's an amazing story, very briefly, at a school outside of Toledo, Ohio, USA, named Maumee, Maumee High School. They simply said, we would like our students to be exposed to different aspects of ideas. So one teacher suggested, for extra credit, it wasn't even assigned in class, for extra credit, watch a PragerU video, anyone you want. They could have watched one given by a psychiatrist on how to forgive people. I mean, we have a lot of videos. We have videos by 3 former prime ministers, 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, the highest prize in America for journalism, by professors from Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, and down the line. Very serious people make videos for us. So one parent heard about this said, I'm taking my daughter out of class. Any place that allows kids to watch or suggests kids watch a PragerU video is not for me. It's alt-right. It's bigoted. It's all the usual stuff. Sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigoted. 6-herb, as I labeled it as an acronym years ago. And the school, then it went to HuffPost, the famous left-wing website. They did a whole article on it, and then the country went with it, the whole left-wing press.
HuffPost must have been delighted.
Who must have been delighted?
Huffington Post.
Oh, I'm sure they are delighted. Yes, it means they have clout. That is exactly right. And anyway, to make a long story short, they withdrew the suggestion. No longer will PragerU video be suggested by a teacher at the school. So people should read my column. The interesting thing is, our videos are all 5 minutes at PragerU, Prager University, PragerU, whichever one prefers. 5 minutes. The left is afraid that a 5-minute video of conservative thought will undo 4 years of what we call high school left-wing progressive indoctrination. And here's the key. They're right. It takes 5 minutes to burst the irrational, superficial bubble of the left. It doesn't take longer. It's fascinating. They write, PragerU brainwashes. How can you brainwash in 5 minutes? They have kids for 15, 16, 17, 18 years, and then university. And we're brainwashing in 5 minutes. It's Orwellian.
Well, speaking of Orwellian, the censorship, that sort of censorship has been at the very fore of political debate in the United States of America this week, when Senator Cruz invited all of the big tech giants to give evidence in a hearing. And this comes after Twitter tried to ban the intake of information, essentially, because they didn't like what it said about a political candidate that they clearly quite like, which was Joe Biden. It was a story by the New York Post on Hunter Biden. And Dennis, my question to you is, we see this, the conservatives already have an uphill battle for all the reasons that you've just listed. Secularization and all those other things that actually take away conservative values. How can we possibly, as conservatives, stand a chance when all of these tech giants, which are so powerful, increasingly powerful, are able to censor the likes of PragerU and even the New York Post article on Hunter Biden?
Well, if the Democrats take over the Senate as well as the presidency, uphill will be an understatement. People have defended the tech companies because in America, the First Amendment protects free speech only from government, right? The government cannot suppress my free speech. That's what the U.S. First Amendment of the Constitution says. But that doesn't mean a private company has to publish anything. It's free to publish or not publish what it wants. The problem is that YouTube, Google, Twitter, and Facebook are the conduit of virtually all information on Earth outside of China. And if they suppress free speech, it's factually much more a danger to free speech than if the government does. The government's ability to shut free speech is minimal compared to the four firms that I just mentioned. And for those libertarians who say, well, it doesn't matter, it's private enterprise, I have a very simple question. The three biggest American or U.S. airlines are American Airlines, Delta Airlines, and United Airlines. Let us say that they announced, like the big three tech companies, If you board our airplane with the Wall Street Journal, you may not fly with us. They're free companies, right? They're private companies. Why are they not free to censor? Why can't they censor who comes on their flights? So if you those of you who think that Twitter and Facebook and Google are allowed to censor because they're private enterprises, why can't the three airlines I mentioned do the same thing?
That's a really good response to those on the sort of, and I am instinctively pro-market, but it is a good response to those who argue, well, actually, free market property rights, we've got to let
Right.
these guys.
All right. So I've never gotten an answer to my airline question.
Your airline question is very good, Dennis, I do admit. Now, listen, my final question, because I realise I've taken up quite a lot of your time. My final question is, you've stopped arguing that the left's moral compass is broken. In fact, you don't argue that at all anymore. You actually argue that the left doesn't have a moral compass at all. I wonder if you could just reflect on how we as conservatives actually make the case for society to become anchored once more and actually adopt a moral compass again. Because is it really just the left that's without a moral compass in 2020?
I have a wonderful answer wonderful in the sense that it's accurate, not that the story is wonderful. We have in America something called National Public Radio because the left does not have enough vehicles in the media. We have to have a government-paid left-wing medium. So it's called National Public Radio. Vast numbers of Americans, liberal and left, get a good part of their news from National Public Radio. They had an author on a few weeks ago who wrote, I think almost inevitably, it was an academic, a book. I don't know if this is the title, but it is the subject, In Defense of Looting.
Wow.
Which, of course, means in defense of stealing. On PragerU, 90% of the videos are not given by me, but I give 10%. And I give all 11 videos on the 10 Commandments. And it is the dominant theme of my life that is the solution to humanity's problems. That won't make a perfect world, but it is the best solution. And that is the 10 Commandments. It's really all you need. And here is a perfect example. Do not steal is no longer a value on the left. Looting is defended. Is a form of reparations. This is one of the arguments given. They are black and therefore they deserve this. This is just a cry of pain. It's not really stealing. They're insured in any event, the stores that they steal from. So believe it or not, do not steal. And what about the riots that go uncondemned by the left? That is not a broken moral compass. It is the absence of a moral compass. So those are a couple of examples in response to what you raised.
Dennis, I feel like we've been quite pessimistic throughout this. Could you just give us one note of why we can actually be cheery as conservatives? Are there any?
Well, by definition, conservatives are cheery. I've written a book on happiness. I've done an hour a week of my radio show on happiness for over 20 years. I'm sort of a happiness expert. And overwhelmingly, every poll shows the further left you go, the less happy the human being is. And so we are already intrinsically happy for happier, let's put it that way. Every human has pain, and pain doesn't mean you're not happy. It's another issue. But I will give you perhaps an answer that will not fully satisfy you. I have no interest in optimism or pessimism. Both lead to bad consequences. Very simple. If you're optimistic, you can say, things will turn out well. Why should I fight? If you're pessimistic, you say, look, things are going to turn out awful anyway. Why should I fight? So both pessimism and optimism undermine what you most need to do. Fight for freedom. Fight for the UK. Fight for the United States. And that's all I care about. Again, back to Normandy. The average guy who went on Normandy Beach against the Nazis was not optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, everything will turn out fine. They were peeing in their pants on those boats that went on shore.
Mm-hmm.
Optimists don't pee in their pants, but they did what they had to do. So I won't give you a phony argument for optimism. There are many good reasons why things won't turn around or turn out well. But all I know is not will it turn out well. What does Dennis have to do?
Exactly. And when I think, what does Darren have to do? And then I consider that my grandfather fought in the Korean War to fight off communist tyranny, and actually South Korea is now one of the most prosperous,
That's right.
free.
And look at North Korea.
Exactly. And that is a beautiful way to end the show. So thank you so much, Dennis, for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Well, you give me reason for optimism.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.